Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to have you all here with me in the Meet Your Mentor podcast. If you're coming back for another episode, then welcome back. You guys already know a little bit about me. For those of you who are listening for the first time and don't know much, my name is Elise, and I will be your host for today. Currently, I'm a junior in high school, and I'm here interning at the Mentor Project, which gives me a chance to talk to so many incredible people. As for this podcast, each week I will be interviewing one of our world-renowned mentors and asking about their job, the biggest challenge they faced, what it means to be a mentor, and so much more. Quick shout out to our listeners and our sponsors for making this podcast possible. Now, I think you guys will love what we have in store for you today. Today, I get to talk to Cameron Gibson. Cameron is a data engineer who works for Google via Tech Systems. He is currently pursuing a doctorate in computational linguistics, and he already has his master's in linguistics, master's in creative writing, and a bachelor of science in English. Cameron reads and edits fiction and nonfiction writing, and he has over 3 years of experience as an NLP and machine learning researcher and engineer. I'm very excited to learn more about Cameron, so let's get started. So Cameron, why don't you go ahead and maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself, and maybe if you want to just jump right in, go ahead and tell us about what it means to be a data engineer and what that role kind of entails.
Yeah, sure. So I guess a little bit about me. I mean, you gave the full spiel there for the most part. So yeah, it's been kind of a roundabout road to where I'm at today. But yeah, my background is largely in the humanities. I got a degree in English. Studied, literature, mainly like literary theory was mainly my thing. I have a background in creative writing. I specialized in like nonfiction and genre fiction, and I was a writer and editor for a few years before I ended up taking the route towards linguistics. I was actually a PhD in literature before, and life changed those things, and I ended up getting involved in linguistics, and then eventually computational linguistics. And now I'm here as you said, working as a data engineer. And largely, so what that largely means is, as part of like kind of a specialization is like within the net of a larger role that I kind of play for Tech Systems as they contract to Google. And it's largely what we do is we work on the CCIA agent. So CCIA is like the conversational, like when you call into certain end clients and like a bot agent like talks to you, it's like, hey, how can I help you? All of those types of things. We try to improve the bot's ability to service customers. So what that means for me particularly is like I do anything from labeling data, like conversational data. So we pull basically a sample of the customer's conversations with both the bots and the live agents. We then basically do data analysis on said data, where we look at like where did the bot fail, where was it successful at understanding the customer, and where did it falter in understanding the customer, and then we try to generate and implement ways to improve the bot's ability to understand and provide service to the end client's customers. And so for me specifically, that involves like basically getting that data, getting it in a format that is accessible and useful for data analytics, and then actually completing said data analytics. That can be anything from making dashboards that include various statistical charts and visualizations of the analytics that the end client is interested in. Largely, like, was the bot successful in helping the customer or not? Mm-hmm. And then largely also just building small, like not small, but doing basically code supporty-ish things where I, do some contributions to basically help the other people that work in similar roles to me do their jobs in an easier way, with like basically building tools that will help do the labeling and the analytics at large. Yeah. Is what my day-to-day, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I know this is kind of like I feel like I could do a quick Google search almost to find this out. But I feel like when you take that data and are trying to code the bot to like work better and function like a little bit easier, I suppose, how do you like come up with how do you like code it to know the definition of like various phrases? You know, people say things in a lot of different ways, and how does that kind of work?
That is largely the um, there is no clean path to it.
Yeah.
Like the going saying is language is messy. That's
Yeah.
a fun linguistic term, and so it is kind of like a negotiation that like we have like largely a team of. That's kind of where I exist in the NLP based space or the computational linguistics element, which is like, okay, we have these natural people speak the way that they speak. It's not pretty. It's not clean.
Yeah.
So again, it's like that conversation that you have to have. It's like, okay, how do we get the bot to understand better? That
Mm-hmm.
largely looks like, largely it's via labeled data. So essentially, what the end client and the way the bots are designed is that basically the how to explain it without getting too technical is in a way that makes sense. So essentially, what computers are very good at doing is looking at stats and patterns and things
Yeah.
like that. They're not very smart. They're not. You're never going to have a computer, perhaps that like actually understands what the customer is trying to say.
Yeah.
Which is why people like me exist.
Yeah.
Because there are obviously misinterpretations and mistranslations. What you can get a bot to do though is to look at words in context and say, oh, this word occurs very close to this word often, and when you can basically tell it or give it labels and say like, okay, when it occurs next to this word in this context this many times, we will assume that it's a
Gotcha.
verb or that it's functioning in this particular way. And we have methods to encode those types of meanings. Typically they use word embeddings without getting too deep into the technical side of things. But basically you turn words into mathematical vectors.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get different senses of words by changing values in those vectors. So in order to like fine tune or to get the bot to understand customer data better, we essentially try to fine tune the pipeline or the path that the bot is, or that the conversation will take through the bot. So essentially, it's the customer says something, it triggers a specific intent. The bot understands X thing from the thing
Mm-hmm.
or from what the customer said. And it's going to take it to a certain path in this larger like finite state automata. So like if you trying to think of an apt comparison of things, but it's almost like a game of telephone in a way. But with the destinations are already predefined. And largely we're like the bot is going to bucket whatever the customer said into one of those predefined destinations.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's right or not, kind of debatable. But essentially what we try to do is to label the end result of that path that it takes through the individual buckets
Yeah.
and say this was wrong. And once we know like if like what where it's going wrong with those conversations, we take a look at, okay, why is it going wrong? Okay, well, it's matching this utterance to this specific intent based on those other factors that we talk about. So like this is what the bot is kind of understanding the person to say. We don't want it to understand that or to understand it in that way. So we're going to throw some more training phrases at it. So like other customer utterances that will bias it towards bucketing that specific utterance into the correct bucket. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
In some
I
roundabout
can
way.
tell what you're getting at, definitely. And I mean, I feel like if you think about it, that's kind of like the first idea that people have that like comes to mind. And I feel like it was the same way for me. It just, and like in 2021, you'd feel like there would almost be a more efficient, like less tedious kind of way to go about it. But I mean, like you
there
said,
certainly
language.
are. It's just this is like, so there's, again, you don't want to, without getting too there are definitely like ways, like there's an unsupervised learning methodologies, which is what a lot of like your search engines are backended by. There's a system that Google employs called BERT, which is largely like the whole neural net, the whole AI phenomena that you hear a lot about, things like AlphaGo and all those kind of things, where those just take these large data sets and they're able to again, like find those patterns, and once they've kind of internalized those patterns and those distributions, they're very good at returning said information based on what you've said pretty accurately. We've taken like the end clients and Google take this approach, the more rules driven based approach, because it's easier to control, largely in a way.
That makes sense. Yeah, gotcha. With that in mind, I have a couple questions. My first one is just clarification. What does NLP stand for?
Natural language processing.
Good to know. Okay. I know I mentioned that, and I know you did too, so I just thought I'd ask.
Yes.
But my other thing is, so I'm assuming that the data like processing kind of technique that you just mentioned, I'm assuming that's more similar to like Google Home than what you do.
Google Home. Yeah, it can take a wide variety. So it would still be what I do on a day like that would still fall. Are you asking like whether that falls under the scope of NLP specifically, or specifically data engineering itself?
NLP, not data engineering.
Oh yeah, so yeah, NLP as a whole, that covers a whole bunch. Anything that involves like teaching computers to understand
Yeah.
text and or speech would fall under the branch of NLP. So
Okay.
Google Home, Amazon Alexa, Siri, all the way down to autocorrect or text prediction or Google Translate. All of those functions all fall under the frame of NLP.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. It's good to know. So I kind of want to not necessarily like shift gears, but I want to ask how and like at what point did you know data engineering was something you wanted to do? Because I know you said like you studied a lot of literature, and so I'm kind of assuming that this wasn't something where you grew up and you were like, oh, I want to be a data engineer.
Yeah, no, I mean, data engineering isn't even like the last stop here. This is kind of like the first stop for me.
Yeah.
But like there's a whole stretch of data processing. So I would say that my end goal is to be an ML, natural language processing engineer, like researcher/engineer. That's what my PhD is centered around. And I would say that like I knew all of my research and the things that I do like largely relate back to the arts. So I got involved in this whole NLP space based on being in creative writing, and the fact that in order to progress as a writer, typically it's or to understand your unique voice, as Raymond Carver might put it, you typically have to understand your influences, who's influencing you, what they do that is influencing you specifically, and then you take a conglomeration of those different influences and the tools that you can learn from them, and you combine them. Basically you utilize them all. In creative writing they talk about having a tool set. So for me it was largely I struggled throughout my MFA to figure out why I liked certain things but didn't like other things. I wrote in genre fiction. I didn't like reading a lot of genre fiction, which was very strange. Like, and I was like, why is it that the case? And so what I did was I hand diagrammed like 100 sentences from like 10 authors in from books that I did like, and then 10 from books that I didn't like. And what I found was like, oh, well, the reason I like these people is because, and then I diagrammed 100 of my own sentences. And so I was like, oh, well, I like these people because they write sentences the way that I do. Like we follow the same, layout or, template basically, more frequently and I like these people do something entirely different, which is probably why I enjoy their work a little bit less, even though they're all prolific and very good. And from there, it just kind of like sparked my interest in, and being able to like do that at scale, like to scale that up, to look at, to do like data analytics, on basically creative text. It would fall under the field of authorship analysis. But that's largely what got me interested in this whole space was basically being an MFA student and just really struggling to like find, the thing about my work that A, made it unique, and B, understanding, how to like really having a strong desire to master process and to understand process. And then trying to bring those the things that I was learning to scale, and then being able to replicate them such that other writers could take advantage of them.
Okay, that was a really, really interesting answer, because I feel like for me and for a lot of other people, I would assume, you think like science and engineering and like literature are like two opposite sides of the spectrum, and that's just very cool that you found that kind of connection that, as you kind of voiced it, it's very like present, and like you can just immediately tell what the connection is. So that's really interesting. It's good to know. Can I ask you also so I know you mentioned you're getting your doctorate in computational linguistics, and will that like change the way you do your current job, or will that allow you to like progress further into the field, and like how will that change things for you now?
Yeah, it will definitely allow me to progress further into the field more than anything. Like, sadly, there is like a somewhat of a barrier to entry for like NLP researching jobs where they kind of require you to have a PhD in
Mm-hmm.
NLP or computational linguistics in order to get said job. Um, just because, again, there is a going notion in a lot of computer science that you can solve anything with math and algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
Language, words, as you pointed out, don't always tend to go very hand in hand with math. There's a lot of overlap and a lot of things that you can map um, algorithmically, but there's also a lot of elements of language that are not so cannot be so neatly contained in
Yeah.
categories. Um, and so, like, the way that I see myself, hopefully in several years, being able to develop my own software packages for writers, but then also to be able to extend a lot of those functionalities that we talked about earlier, with like the Google Home, or say Amazon Alexa and Siri, all of those things, to low resource languages. And a low resource language is a language that does not have like very large data sets. So they might have like a bunch of speakers. So like the language I work with right now is a language from Eritrea and Western Africa. It has 10 million speakers worldwide, and yet Google, Amazon, or like Google Home, Amazon Alexa, all of those products that we enjoy as English speakers, they don't have access to,
Mm-hmm.
because there's just not enough collected data that is in a format that you can use to train said models. To support those languages. So that's
Yeah.
kind of my interest, is like basically being able to extend all of these functionalities to the languages of the world that are, I guess, underrepresented. Um, and yeah, I think this degree will definitely allow me to reach into that that
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's a very, very cool and like almost unique, I'd say, goal to have in mind. But that's really interesting. It's not something I considered, so I'm kind of glad you mentioned it and you brought it up. But
Yeah.
yeah. So my next question for you is, um, throughout kind of your experience, whether it was like getting your degrees or just I don't know where you're at now, what was the biggest challenge that you faced?
Oh man. The biggest challenge. Man, what was there's been so many. No, don't let it be. It's just. I think it's Ooh, the biggest challenge, and or like I guess the biggest challenge would be just frustrations. Like you run into, like, in any field, you run into kind of like, I won't call it like the gatekeeping, but you run into the standards of things, where like you said, there's like a lot of things and topics, particularly in any field, where it's like a lot of times that just go overlooked, or methodology. You'll run into professors, or you'll run into people in the field that you want to try or do something new, or push the field in a different direction, or um, push your research in an experimental direction that hasn't been visited before. And whenever you do that, you get a lot of pushback, and it can be very discouraging. And I think that was, in most of the fields that I have been a part of, both in the humanities and in the sciences, that was always the hardest part for me, was being able to find a path
Mm-hmm.
to reach, said vision or goal, knowing that it's attainable, but perhaps not having the support um, in order to do it kind of the way that you want to do it, I guess you'd say. And it's not always possible to do it that way, but I would say that's, yeah, like I feel like you will, like, anytime you're endeavoring to do something, that's different or unique, or, not the standard approach to doing something, you will always get pushback from, just the field or people at large, because,
Mm-hmm.
they're, things that are on a non-standard or pushing against the standard makes people that like the standard uncomfortable. um, so yeah, it could always be, a challenge uh, to stay encouraged and to find the support that is needed, in order to continue to push forward with whatever it is that you're trying to do. But there are people out there. There's always, I've always been able to find, one or two professors or one or two friends that are like, wow, that's a good idea and a good approach. Go for it, and, I'll help you out as much as you can. So, or as much as they can. So that was probably it, I think.
Yeah. Good to know. I feel like there's, no like clear cut way to kind of overcome that frustration. But was there anything aside from, finding people who agreed with you and held that same like opinion and vision? Aside from that, was there any other like thing that kind of helped you to get over the initial hurdle that you might be able to like share with people, like some advice that you would give almost?
Yeah. Advice. Just stick to it, like that's the real thing. Like if you really true like any, like you said, if you read like the biographies of most great individuals in the world, like I said, there are they always met some pushback, even, typically, just sun going around the earth,
Yeah.
versus the earth going around the sun, pushback, there's always going to be that. But if you really firmly believe in, whatever you're doing, stick to it, don't give up. And be okay with putting things down, with taking it slowly. Like I think a lot of the pressure that comes, with, pushing yourself and, whatever it is that you're trying to pursue, your dreams, your goals, there is, an expectation of that you have to do it or accomplish or achieve at certain rates. And I think my biggest advice would be to embrace the journey. I won't say embrace the struggle or anything like that, but be okay with, learn to celebrate the little successes. The little, and appreciate small progress. Like, even if it's like, whatever it is that you're pursuing, if you do like anything related to it, small though it may be. Like for me, like an example would be like with writing. When I was a writer, like there's, particularly in genre fiction, this big push to be producing and producing quickly. Like, most writers in that genre, a lot of times are talking about pushing 5,000 words a day or something like that. For me, a lot of times 100 words, 250 words would be like, max what I could output. And there was like this really strong pressure, at getting better to be faster. And, when I took the pressure off of, and just learned to like be like, wow, I got 250 words on the page, and started doing that daily. Or even if I just read, something, in like, crazy busy schedule world, like reading is so important. Even just like, being able to take that in stride and be like, wow, I read something today that is contributing to my writing, or that is contributing in, even if it's just a little bit, it's still contributing. And then rest, like even if you have to take a day off because you're super tired, that's still doing, the work of pushing yourself towards your goal because you're taking self-care. All of those things are so important, like keeping your mental health, doing what you need to do to, maintain your mental health, because let the external pressures be the external pressures, but you make sure you're taking care of yourself and really celebrating, the little progresses that you make towards achieving your dreams and your goals every day.
Yeah, I think that was some great advice. So thank you. Thank you for sharing, and kind of thank you for that, I don't know, inside look, I'd almost say, on kind of what you've had to go through in order to get where you are today. I want to talk a little bit more about the mentor project itself now, and kind of, I have a few like sub questions for that group. What your experience has been like, and maybe if you could talk a little bit about what it means for you to be a mentor. And lastly, maybe talk, like, could you mention one of your own mentors and kind of what that experience was like?
Yeah, so I'm fairly new to the project, so I'm still meeting all of the mentors, still getting to know them as people. But I've been like, the meetings that I've been to thus far, they're just amazing, just really great people. They've done this amazing work, but like as Deborah puts it, just quiet stars. Stars in their own field and in their own right, but they don't act like stars. And it's really great to be able to kind of like see that what it looks like. For all of your hard work to eventually, pay off in the way that, theirs has. So I would say my experience of the mentors thus far has been absolutely wonderful and amazing. And what it means to me to be a mentor is that, it's an opportunity to give back. Coming from an athletics background and, just, writing background, so much has been poured into me. you can't get anywhere without other people,
Yeah.
particularly people that have done what you already want to do, or just the support systems, like you said. And so like I've always been fortunate to have really great support systems in all of my endeavors. And so this is an opportunity, hopefully, to be able to, provide that support to someone else, to other students, other individuals, people, kids who, need that support system. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And I would say that, like right now, I think I will be working with Hera a little bit more, in the not too distant future. But I would say like Valerie Fridlin has been, a mentor for me over the over the last 3 years. I'd say I was a grad student for her, like under her, I guess you'd say, at UNR. And man, she got me into linguistics eventually, because I was so like dissatisfied with the research and the approaches I was taking in literature. She was like, well, why don't you, think about linguistics? The way that you talk about, these things like really seems to mesh well with the way that, we do things in linguistics. And, I was like, okay, why not? And so I took a couple of classes, really loved it. And, it's got me here today. And, it's, she's been there like every step of the way. She's got me involved in the Mentors Project. She, helped, get me involved in research, and she still gets me involved in cool projects. And, if I have questions, things like that, she's always kind of like there. And so she's definitely been one of those people that, I would consider, to be a source, and just a wonderful person to talk to and, be around, and just great. And all the mentors here that I've met thus far seem to be very much the same. And I'm hoping I can, be that, and, or be something similar for someone else.
Yeah. It's always really interesting to just hear about the impact mentoring has had on, all these people in their lives. So, I mean, that's usually why I ask about it. But yeah. So I have a couple things left before we start wrapping up. The first one is, if there's anybody who's listening and wants to learn more about you or get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Probably via email. I could link my email in the chat, but it's what's the one I'm using at this point? I have so many. Email would be, I think it's Gibson.Cameron1993@gmail.com is the best way to probably get in touch with me. I check that one every day, all the time, constantly. Otherwise, I don't have any like other crazy socials or anything like that. So yeah, I would say email is probably the best way. My phone, I would give my phone, but I check that less than I check like any of my other sources 9 out of 10 times. So
no, the email is fine.
Cool.
And then as well, just to make that easier, I can like go ahead and put that into the description. So if anybody wants it, it'll be there.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So my last thing is, I started this a while ago. I've been running the podcast longer than I've been doing this last little like section, but I always think it's important to know like your mentor as a well-rounded person and not just like the equivalent of their job kind of. So I have a few like almost rapid fire questions for you that are just about like random hobbies, stuff like that.
No worries.
So my first one is, you're obviously a writer. So what's your favorite book?
Oh, that's the toughest question off the bat.
I feel like anytime anyone asks this to me, just all the books I've read leave my mind,
It's like, well, I mean, like there's so many that like for me, it's more like so many and like I have like the hardest time. You can't see, but there's like a bookshelf, like there's bookshelves just like covering the walls over here. So now I'm like turning around and looking and I'm like, ooh, God, that's rough. I can give you I can give you some of my favorite authors. I would say technically the best like technically written book that I've ever read was probably Old School by Tobias Wolff. It's it's not like anything flashy or interesting as far as the plot goes, but it's just structurally it's so good. It's like it's a masterclass in just writing technique. My favorite book. So I'm a big Ted Chiang fan. So if you've ever seen Arrival, have you seen that movie Arrival?
No.
It was out a couple of years ago. Anyway, it's based on his his short story of your life and others. And that collection is just like mind-blowingly awesome.
Mhm.
So that's first thing that comes to mind. Like
Okay.
obviously, like like the Harry Potters, and there's a slew of other books that I'm
Yeah.
super. But like as far as like just my favorite, like go back to reread, just mine, just great. This is great. Definitely Chad Chang, Story of Your Life and Others, short
Okay.
story collection.
Okay. Good to know. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. They sound really interesting. But
Just real slipstreamy. Yeah.
yeah. My second one is, do you play any instruments, or did you used to?
No, I wish I did. I tried to pick up the guitar at one point, but I have like long fingers, but like not like guitar long playing fingers.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I did the piano, and I did the drums for I did like many things like for very short spans of time. Most of
Yeah.
my background, my life was like athletics, so that like consumed all of my time.
Mhm.
That would have been
Makes
spent
sense.
learning instruments. But I did say if I could sing, I would be the lead singer. Um, for a band. That's like my like low key like alternate life
Yeah.
would be thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. My next question is, how do you spend your time when you're like away from work?
Doing schoolwork.
Good
But yeah,
answer.
I guess yeah, like I just a variety of things. I like going out with friends, to museums, bars, just whatever. New York, I live in New York City, so there's tons of stuff. But when I'm not doing that, I am a big sports follower. Like I watch literally basically all sports in general, anything that I can find that's on. I'm a big strategy based person, so anything from chess to football, I will watch it. I consume a lot of esports too. I used to play a lot of video games, but with time being as limited as it is, I don't play as much as I used to.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like just like literally anything. I love going to plays, concerts. Uh, I just kind of like try to dabble in like whatever I can like get, whatever I get invited to. I just like try to
Yeah.
say yes.
Yeah. You got to keep things exciting, right?
You
Yeah.
only live once. You got to experience everything you can.
Yep. Yeah. My last question for you is, what's your favorite movie franchise?
Franchise. Oh man,
You can also
these
pick
are
movie if
tough.
you want. I just figured franchises are more like well
Yeah,
known.
easy to to
Yeah.
to get behind.
Yeah.
Uh Favorite movie franchise. Ooh, God, man, there's just so many that come to mind. I'm like, oh, I'm sliding another one. If I say this, I'm sliding this. You know,
I mean,
I
go
mean,
for it.
it's got to be. I guess it's got to be Lord of the Rings. Like, I mean, like the extended editions, you can't really beat those, and they've aged
Mhm.
so well. Like there's obviously like MCU, all those types of things, but they're still so young. You don't know how they're gonna do. You
Yeah.
know, I'm sure they will hold up. But like it's just for me, it's like one of those things where it's super impressive that Lord of the Rings was made like between like the early '90s to like the like, yeah, was it like mid '90s, early '90s, something like that. Anyway, and like 30 years later almost. I'm
Yeah.
old now. They still hold up. You can still watch them and not be like, wow, this is not good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll give it to Lord of the Rings because yeah,
Yeah.
longevity.
That's interesting. I haven't watched them, but I definitely need to get around to that someday. It's
You
on my
should.
like list. Yeah.
They are worth the watch. I will say that much.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, that was pretty much all I had for you, but this has been really, really interesting and fun. So I just want to thank you, Cameron, and thank you to everyone who's listening as well. I hope you all thought that was like really interesting and maybe are able to, take something away from it, right? If you want to learn more about Cameron, feel free to email him, which I will go ahead and put in the description, as I mentioned earlier. And if you want to learn more about the Mentor Project, you can go to mentorproject.org, which again, I will put in the description below. And you can learn more about us that way. I hope to see you all back here next week. And once again, thank you so much to our listeners and sponsors for making this podcast possible. We really appreciate everything you do. So thank you, and I hope to see you guys next week.